help. Help, help, and no don't. It must have been half an hour later, a child cried out real loud, like it was hurt.
In the dark history of crime, some cases stand out because of their shocking turns, spine-chilling secrets, and huge effects on the communities they affect. These are the cases that keep us up at night, making us wonder about how bad people can be and how fragile our own safety is. Today, we will look at a case like this that sent fear through the town of Queensville and changed the lives of its people for good. Hi, and welcome back to our channel. If you are new here, please consider subscribing, as it helps us motivate to create more intriguing content for you. Let's have a look at the most twisted case you've ever heard. When Christine Jessup, who was 9 years old, went missing on that fateful day in October, it shook the whole town to its core. Everyone was scared and started to question their neighbors. The story began in the early 1970s. Robert Bob Jessup and Janet Jessup did not have an easy time trying to have a child. After having trouble getting pregnant, they adopted a baby boy, Ken. But they were in for a surprise from fate. Christine Marion Jessup was born on November 29, 1974, which was a surprise to her parents because of a miracle. Early in life, she had a lot of health problems, and her family was always worried because she was in the hospital so often. Christine, on the other hand, was a fighter. She looked just like her mother and was both grown up and innocent like a child at the same time. She loved soft things more than anyone else, and she wanted to become a vet. Christine's favorite part of her week was going to the Baladin farm to play with the animals. People often thought that Christine's tendency to talk a lot, or what some people call her motor mouth, was childish. But she was smart and curious, and loved to ask questions and find out new things. In the fall of 1984, the Jessup family was keeping a secret close to their chest. Everyone thought that Christine's father, Bob, had gone to California on business. He was behind bars serving time for financial fraud. Janet, Christine's mother, had a plan to make sure she was always there to meet her daughter every afternoon when she got off the school bus. Janet used to hurry home from the Richmond Hill Sears store where she worked. On that warm day in October 1984, Christine could not wait to show her mother and her brother Ken her new recorder. She and her friend Leslie Chipman walked out of school and played on the swings for about 20 minutes. They agreed to meet up at 3:50 p.m. that same day. When Christine walked into the house, she knew that no one was there. Her mother had already told her that she was going to go see her dad in jail. It was possible that they would be back by 4, but it was not certain. Christine's dog, Freckles, was the only person she had to talk to. Before she left the house, she looked for a nickel in the dish of change and tried to call her friend Leslie, but the line was busy. So she went to the local store to buy some bubble gum for herself. Then she walked her bike across Leslie Street and into her house. At 4:10 p.m., Janet and Ken got back to their house. Christine's red bike was on its side, and the frame and carrier were bent. Janet noticed that Christine's jacket was hanging on a high peg, which was strange because she could not have reached it without a chair. Ken called for her in the basement, asking if she was with Harold, her beloved pet frog, but she did not answer. Something was wrong for sure. They chose to wait until dinner, hoping that she would come home soon. But as the hours went by, Janet's fear grew, and by 7 p.m., she knew she had to call the cops. Janet mentioned that she had searched everywhere and had the realization that if something was amiss, she should likely reach out to the authorities. The surgeon who took the call had a gut feeling that something was wrong and sent a car right away. As soon as people heard that Christine had gone missing, the Queensville Fire Department and volunteer firemen from nearby places went to work. Soon a group of worried people were searching the whole neighborhood, from the fields and graveyards to the thick forest below the hill. It was a search like nothing Canada had ever seen before. The whole town worked together to look for Christine, but the big question was where she could have gone. The detectives thought she might have run away to visit her father in jail or stayed with a friend longer than expected. But none of these ideas worked out. When Christine's 24-year-old neighbor heard the cops at his door, he thought it was a complaint about his construction work. He surprised his father Alphonse by suggesting that little Christine might be missing. They had a game where they would speculate about events, but they never wagered any money on it. Alphonse responded, saying that it could be Ken who was getting into trouble at his age of socializing. Alphonse was taken aback by how effortlessly his son had won the bet this time, considering that Christine was indeed missing. The cops asked a few simple questions and left. Even though they did not know her, everyone in town was looking for her. But her neighbors, the Morays, chose to stay at home. Detective John Nashe told Christine's father, Bob Jessup, that his daughter had gone missing. Other people in jail started to put pressure on the guards and the people in charge to let Bob go home to his family. The next day, on October 4, 1984, Christine's friend Leslie told the police that 2 of Christine's friends had sent her a hate letter. So the agents went to Christine's school to look into the idea that she ran away because of a rivalry at school. Ross Breather, the principal of Queensville Public School, told the media that all 106 kids at the school got street-proofing training to stop things like Christine's kidnapping. It meant finding uncomfortable and dangerous situations and figuring out what to do about them. He had told the staff to keep quiet about what had happened. Still, things took an unexpected turn, and the school became a place where chaos, fear, and lies spread. After Christine Jessup went missing, murder detective John Shepard noticed a change in the mood of Queensville in just a few hours. He saw that parents were becoming more worried about their children. Based on what happened when Christine went missing, people came up with different ideas. One idea was that Christine saw an adult and fell off her bike because of it. But did she fall off her bike when she saw a stranger? Or did she do it without thinking because she saw a familiar face smile at her? The window of time was very small. Either the killer was lucky, or he knew the family's routine inside and out. So far, no one had asked for a payment, and a crazy person killing someone was unlikely but not impossible. On the same day, October 3, 1984, there were 4 phone calls to the Jessup home from people who did not say anything before hanging up. Everyone was a suspect at this time. Investigators thought that one of Ken's friends might have had a dark wish for the young girl. So they asked Ken for a list of the names of his friends. They were on high alert because Bob's departure added to the mystery of the case and made them wonder if Christine had been taken by someone who knew Bob was no longer there. Was it possible that one of the other prisoners had taken Christine to get back at him? Or did the missing person have something to do with the fraud that put Bob in jail? The search for Christine had stopped going anywhere until the York Regional Police got a tip from a nearby town about a troubled teenager named Dean McPhail who was known to carry a knife. In his past, he had tied up a woman, exposed himself to 2 girls, and hurt a 10-year-old boy. And if that was not enough, McPhail had also worked as a gravedigger at the Queensville Cemetery for a short time, which gave him a lot of chances to watch Christine move around. Even his probation officer told the cops to think about him as a suspect, but it did not work out that way. Another idea was that Janet's father, Gordon Simpson, and his new wife, Hilda, took their own granddaughter because they were worried about how Janet was raising Christine while Bob was away. Hilda was always following Janet around and criticizing everything she did. She also always said the strangest things. When the Jessups moved into their Queensville home, Hilda said something terrible would happen to Christine in this house. This led many people to think that Hilda had something to do with Christine going missing. Later, some of her friends told her about something else they knew about her. They said that she often hung out with boys until late at night and sometimes walked home with them at 9 or 10 p.m. Christine told her friends she had a boyfriend who was older than her. Janet had told the cops something different. Janet, Christine's mother, surprised Detective John Nusha with how calm she was when he went to see her. She just said hi and did not ask any questions about any leads. Wally Robson, Bob's brother-in-law, expressed his observation to the detectives that Janet appeared indifferent to the situation, suggesting that something was wrong. The detectives, recognizing that people grieve in different ways, withheld their personal opinions and refrained from disclosing their thoughts to the public. Sally Browning, a family friend, mentioned that Janet had been taking Valium to calm her nerves after her mother's passing. Despite the loss of her daughter, Janet seemed composed and repeatedly expressed her belief that Christine was safe and sheltered in a building in the woods, assuring that she would return home soon. Speculations arose among some community members, suspecting that Janet's behavior was a tactic to secure Bob's release from jail. However, on October 6, 1984, Bob was released on humanitarian grounds after a brief 3-day incarceration. Over time, both the townspeople and Bob himself began to question the apparent lack of concern displayed by a mother whose child was missing. Bob defended Janet, affirming that she would never intentionally harm anyone. Never before had Queensville been so busy. Within a few days, different reports of strange things happening in the area came in. The first one came from Sandra and Bruce Forwood. While they were driving, they saw something scary. A man in a greenish-blue car had a child under his arm who was fighting. They thought about following the car but decided against it because he might have been a parent. People all over town said they had seen a white, off-white, or silver car around the time Christine went missing. A 25-year-old guy driving a silver Datsun pulled up next to them and offered to help with a searchlight on his dashboard. But the mud was all over his car and it smelled awful. When he thought a police car was coming toward them, he ducked down and ran away quickly. It was not a police car. It was just another car looking for Christine. It was disappointing for the agents that they could not find out anything else about this mysterious man. As the investigation went on, 2 curious kids found a diary in a rundown barn. This gave them a small bit of hope. Mike Lundgren, Jessup's neighbor, went to check out the barn with a friend. What they found inside was like something from a horror movie. There were rusty pulleys and chains all over the place, and a huge spider web made of a fishing line was almost big enough to catch them. It was the mysterious writing on the walls that gave them the creeps. The phrases finally see, "The bird disappears," and read the words are hidden were spooky. They found a man who lived nearby and hired the farmhouse. He claimed that dairy was his own and said that an artist had painted those words on the walls for his lost love. Suspicion was a dark cloud that hung over everyone. But there was Philip Brennan, a guy who was accused of doing horrible things to his own family. His wife dared to tell people about the troubling claims that he had done wrong things with their 5-year-old daughter. The police went through his house and found horrible material for adults, but his alibi seemed to be true. Still, the worry did not go away. Bob Jessup was getting more and more upset as the investigation into Christine's disappearance stalled. He had no idea that when he was cleaning out his shed one day, he would find a clue. He found a folded piece of paper by accident. When he looked at it more closely, he saw that it was a map, roughly drawn but clear. It was shocking to see that it led to his own house. He used his eyes to follow the weak lines as they led east for many kilometers to a part of the Durham region. Bob called his wife, Janet, right away, and the two of them tried to figure out what the map meant. They finally figured out that it ended very close to the house of Hector Drummond, an old family friend of Janet's father who visited the Jessup home 3 or 4 times a year. Janet's mother used to say that Hector was a member of the Odd Fellows and liked to dress up in women's clothes. But as time went on, she became more comfortable around him. Janet and Bob knew they had to find out the truth on their own after they looked at the map. When they went to Hector's house, a notepad was on the table. When Bob looked at the pad in bright light, he was shocked to see thin lines of the same map. Even though Hector Drummond was a family friend, he was still a suspect. The cops looked into him carefully, but in the end, they found no evidence that he had anything to do with Christine's disappearance. The map was just one more strange thing to happen in a case that seemed to be full of false leads and dead ends. As the sun came up on December 31, 1984, in Sunderland, Ontario, which is about 100 kilometers northeast of Toronto, Fred Patterson saw something strange going on in a nearby field. His German Shepherd and a stray Great Dane were both running around and barking every now and then. The field north of Patterson's house and south of the 4th Grant belonged to James Cull, a high school vice principal from Toronto. Patterson had been hearing the dogs bark for a long time. When he finally gave in, he brought his 2 girls to the area to check it out. He found a worn path that led to a garbage pile, but what he saw next shocked and confused him. It was the body of a pig dressed up in clothes. and he thought right away that it was a mean-spirited joke played by teenagers. Then he saw the feet, and he knew right away who it was. A white sock was on one of them. It was a child's body that was found in a field. It could have been someone who killed themselves or someone else who had bad luck. But unless the Pattersons were cut off from the rest of the world, they would have heard about Christine's disappearance. Even Patterson's young girls knew that they had found something that thousands of people had been looking for 3 long months. Patterson ran back to his house and called the Jern Regional Police without giving it a second thought. Even the most experienced detectives got a bad feeling when they found the child's bones. As they looked at the skeleton, it was clear that the top body had broken down, leaving only bones. But there was something else about the scene that was even more scary. The child's legs were spread apart and bent at the knees in a way that did not make sense. It looked a lot like how Albert DeSalvo, the notorious Boston Strangler, left his victims. It was another thing that made the act even more mysterious. The strewn-about blue clothes, the pair of blue pants, and the left-behind running shoe all pointed to a possible fight. As the police carefully searched the area, they noticed something else that was very important. They noticed a brown pouch. The all-lost number 202 recording fit snugly inside. On the label were the words Christine Jessup. In the meantime, further away, more proof was being found. Buttons, a plastic drinking glass. Everything was handled carefully and tagged so that it could tell its story. As the head pathologist for Ontario, John Hilston Smith, looked at the body parts, the other investigators noticed something strange. Even though the body had been dead for a long time, a lot of hair was still stuck to the remains of the head. But it was the chain, which had a few hairs stuck in the dried skin around it, that caught their attention. One of them was darker than the others and had a different width. Dental records were checked to make sure she was who she said she was. But when it was seen that her teeth had turned pink, Smith ordered a diatom test to find out if she drowned. But the results were not clear, and there were so many diatoms that Smith thought the test was tainted. With so many diatoms around, Smith thought the test was wrong. The records of Christine Jessup's teeth showed a match. Before telling the Jessup family, the officers went to Reverend Bev Hall and her husband's house. She knew what had happened when she opened the door and saw the detective standing there. Detective Nashe told her what was going on and asked her to be in the room with Christine's family when they got the news. When Bob and Janet saw the police and the Reverend in their driveway, they thought, "So this is it." Janet kept asking, "Why? Where is Chrissy?" Bob just wanted to know if his little girl had suffered. As the medical experts continued to look at Christine's body, Smith noticed discolorations on her skull. These marks showed that she had taken not one but 2 hard blows. The injuries happened before she died, and either a sharp item or a fall caused them. Could it have been a club, a bat, or something else? He did not know for sure, but he did know that Christine was still alive when she got that final blow to the head. As he sifted through the dirt, his eyes kept coming back to one thing: a rib with a deep cut from a sharp object. He looked at more ribs, all of which had small cuts that were made by a very sharp cutting edge. It was becoming more and more clear what had caused the death. Someone had brutally stabbed Christine. It was the best way to explain why the upper body had broken down so quickly. The clues at the scene were, to say the least, strange. There were more differences and problems than there were solutions. The buttons found at the scene did not match the color of Christine's shirt, and some of them were missing. Christine's grandma said that she could not find the blue sweater. She was wearing a gray turtleneck sweater. The Jessups said that Christine had never owned anything like it before. The clothes she was wearing showed that she had been kept somewhere else before she was taken to the crime scene. But the police had found bodily fluids in her underwear. It made no sense for the killer to have changed the victim's clothes at the scene. So it looked like at least one attack had probably happened somewhere else. Nothing made sense, so they knew they had to keep looking to find out what was going on. As the search for the murder weapon failed, the case took a chilling turn. A later search of the area turned up a human rib and a spine. Lydia Robinson reported to have heard screams emanating from the vicinity of the body site. She recalled an incident that occurred one night in early October, around 22:56, when she heard voices pleading for assistance. The voice conveyed a deep sense of sadness and desperation as it sought help. Initially, Lydia didn't attach much significance to the incident, perceiving it as a random occurrence. However, approximately 30 minutes later, she distinctly heard a child crying out loudly, indicating distress or trouble. She immediately contacted a local TV station to report what she had heard and requested their assistance. The voice persistently cried out for help, growing increasingly desperate as time went on. Through careful listening, she determined that the sounds were originating from the south or west direction. During that period, the only house in the area belonged to Doug Barnes and Sharon Risborough. However, she had never previously heard of any instances of family disputes at their residence. The screams and the cries of a child were audible until a car departed from the vicinity. Behind every crime, there are haunting facts and a trail of people who were hurting but did not do anything when they could have. The case went nowhere for a long time, but when the body was found in the Jura region, there was a spark of hope. The York Police gave the case to the Durham Regional Police, and Inspector Robert Brown took over. Inspector Brown and his team of agents were desperate to find answers, but all of their leads had gone cold. They were trying everything they could to move forward. Then, on February 14, 1985, they chose to talk to Christine's mom to find out if she knew anything about who might have hurt her daughter. Janet, Christine's mother, did not have a name to give the police at first, but they did not give up. They only needed one name to figure out what was going on. After a lot of prodding, Janet said that her neighbor G. Palmore was a weird kind of guy who played the clarinet and raised honeybees. G. Palmore was born to Alphonse and Ida Moore in 1961. They were a private family that put privacy above everything else. They were good neighbors who were always happy to help out and were known to be reliable. But could this quiet, modest man do something so terrible? The detectives did not seem to have any worries that G. Palmore did what they said he did. But he had a strong excuse. He had been working at a furniture factory 57 kilometers away from where the crime took place. The detectives found out that he left work at 3:32, so he could not have been home before 4:14, which was long after Christine's parents came at 4:10 p.m. Even though Palmore had an alibi, the police kept looking into him and asked why he had not helped look for Christine the night she went missing. Palmore said that he would have happily helped the Jessups if they had asked, but he had been busy helping his father put down weeping tiles around the base of their house. He thought that adding one more person would not make much of a difference since the whole town was already looking. To find out what Palmore thought of Christine, the agents asked him what he thought of her. Palmore said that she was sweet and innocent, but she often said whatever came to her mind. He made a mistake when he said that sometimes they turn out to be crooked. The agents saw this seemingly innocent comment as a reason why the person might have done what they did. People thought Palmore was angry at women and wanted to get back at them for what he saw as the natural allure and promiscuity that comes with age. The detectives were torn between their suspicions and Palmore's good alibi because of the strange things he said. A few weeks later, Palmore let the daughter of a band leader who was an undercover police officer take hair from the jazz group members for a makeup class project on hair analysis. Samples were taken to the Center for Forensic Sciences so they could be tested. Even though the hair on Christine's chain had broken down over time, it was still thought to match Palmore's sample. The officers put out a drawing that looked like him. On April 22, 1985, Palmore was on his way to band practice when he was stopped and charged with killing Christine Jessup. He was so surprised that he could not believe what was going on. He first thought it was just a normal traffic stop because he was not wearing his seatbelt, but he soon realized how serious the situation was. The officers told him that he was in jail for killing Christine Jessup. Palmore's surprise and disbelief were clear as he asked if they were kidding. But it was not a mistake. The cops were sure that what they were doing was right. On January 7, 1986, Palmore's trial for killing Christine began. The prosecution's case against him was based on evidence that was hard to believe, like a cigarette butt and strange red fibers that were said to link Christine to Palmore's car. But later, an unidentified letter showed that the technician who tested the fibers was wearing a red sweater instead of a lab coat. The prosecution's case took another hit when the Moran family said that Palmore got home late at 5:30 p.m. on October 3, 1984. They said that after work, he took a different route to get food and gas. With these problems, the case against Palmore started to fall apart. Even though the proof was weak, Palmore's life would never be the same. He was found guilty of murder in the first degree and given a life sentence in jail. But there was another appeal, and in May 1990, a new hearing began. The proof was still weak, and the Center for Forensic Sciences was missing a lot of records, notes, and samples. But in the end, Palmore's sentence was thrown out because there was not enough proof to keep him in jail. He was let out of jail, and his record was wiped clean. Palmore's long and hard time in court had taken a toll on him, and he was publicly forgiven for being wrongly accused and convicted, which had ruined his life. The Jessup case was never solved, so Christine's sad death was shrouded in mystery. Detective Steve Smith of the Toronto Police Force did not start looking into the cold case until 2019. He heard about the new area of forensic genealogy and thought it could be a big step forward. Smith sent DNA from Christine's underwear to Atermath Incorporated, a company that specializes in genetic testing, for analysis. When we got the results in December 2019, they were not as good as we had hoped. In the DNA database, there were only 2 hits that were far away. Smith did not give up, and with the help of genealogists, he was able to narrow down the family line to about 400 names. They finally focused on a man called Calvin Hoover. Hoover was born in 1956 in Toronto. He worked at Eastern Independent Telecom, which put him in touch with the Jessup family. The investigators figured out that Hoover had heard Janet say that she was going to visit Bob in jail. He then understood that he had a chance to carry out his crazy plan. On October 3, 1984, he took Christine. Her family and the whole town were very upset. Calvin Hoover had problems in his own life, like going bankrupt, having anxiety, being depressed, and having bipolar disorder. In 2015, he killed himself, taking with him the dark secrets of Christine's death. Even though Hoover was dead, the investigators were able to get blood samples from him and do genetic testing, which proved without a question that he was guilty. The DNA match proved that Hoover was involved in the crime, giving the Jessup family peace of mind after almost 40 years of doubt. The end of the case gave those who had been hurt by the tragedy a feeling of peace and closure. But it was also a scary warning that evil can be in places you do not expect it to be. Investigators and people in the community had trouble figuring out how Christine got into the car and whether she was forced or persuaded to do so. The case took a long time to solve because there was not enough proof, the witnesses were not reliable, and there were not any modern forensic tools like DNA testing. Not until genetic genealogy came along did new clues show up and the truth start to come out. The Jessup case is still a haunting part of Canadian history. It shows how devastating a wrong judgment can be and how hard people work to find out the truth.